Morning. 702 ABC Sydney, 666 ABC Canberra and ABC Local Radio New South Wales. It's the big fish, and they don't get much bigger than the great white shark. Barry Bruce is a senior research scientist with CSIRO Marine and Atmospheric Research based in Hobart and is regarded as Australia's foremost authority on the great white shark. Good to have you with us, Barry.
Good to be here.
Barry, these sharks we have off the coast, I'm thinking particularly of the ones that haunt that area from Seal Rocks and particularly along Stockton Beach. Have they always been there, do we know?
Look, we do believe that they've always been there. It's amazing how cryptic they can be. And it's more than just Stockton Beach, by the way. It's the northern end of Stockton Beach, the beach immediately north of Port Stephens, which is Bennett's Beach, near the Hawk's Nest area, and running north past Little Gibber, right up to about halfway between the Broughton Island area and Seal Rocks. That marks the coastal footprint of what we call the white shark nursery area. So that's where we find white sharks between about 1 and 5 years old. You can see them there nearly at all times of the year, but there's a real peak in their occurrence between around about September through to about mid-January, February.
When did we start to study them, Barry?
Well, we first started to study them back in 2007, and we've been up here from Hobart working with our colleagues from New South Wales DPI since that time. We've been coming up every year, and during our research activities up here, we've been focused on understanding their movement patterns, seeing how long individual sharks stay in this particular area and where they go to from here. And we study their movements using a combination of electronic tags, including acoustic tags, which last for about 7 to 10 years, and we put those acoustic tags inside the sharks, and we put satellite tracking tags on their dorsal fin.
Where do they go? Have you discovered their movement?
Look, their movements have been an absolute eye-opener for us. We have seen them go as far north as the southern Great Barrier Reef, as far south as eastern Tasmania, and we've even had them go across the Tasman Sea to New Zealand, in the process diving to over 1,000 metres, and we don't know why they do that. However, there are two very important places for white sharks along the east coast of Australia, and that is the area around Port Stephens that I just described, and also down in southeast Victoria at the bottom end of 90 Mile Beach, which is on the eastern, sort of on the eastern side of Wilson's Promontory there in southeast Victoria. There's a similar nursery area down there, and the sharks that we tag up here, by and large, when they're not here at Port Stephens, although they'll go to various other places, they will move down to the nursery area in southeast Victoria for the late summer autumn period, and then they'll come back up to Port Stephens again, and they'll do that on a migration basis until they're about 5 or 6 year old, and then they start doing other things. So
what size do they attain in that time span? Do you have those sorts of facts yet?
Yes, indeed. We've tagged the sharks up here of a variety of different sizes throughout those age groups, and that puts them, the sizes we generally work with are between 1.8 and even as much as 3 metres, but they're generally between 1.8 and 2.5 metres in length. So they're still quite reasonable sharks. Now, white sharks, of course, have quite large babies. They're around about 1.3 to 1.5 metres when they're born. So that gives you an idea of the sorts of animals we're dealing with. Mm.
And what are they eating, these juveniles that are coasting up and down the east coast? These ones from Stockton Beach or Barubie Point, which is a good surf spot for me. Actually, it's out of the way of the nor'easter in summer. It's a nice break in summer, but I don't think I'll be surfing there at low light times in case they mistake me for a big salmon or something.
Look, I think you'd be reasonably safe. However, of course, these animals are big enough to bite people, and they certainly have done so. Sharks of this size in other areas. But, of course, we've never seen an attack on these beaches. However, if somebody sees a shark like this, then they should treat it with respect and get out of the water. But the sorts of things that they generally eat when they're that size are fish and other sharks. So they'll eat like salmon, like stingrays, eagle rays, mulloway, mullet, some of the reef fish species. Whether or not they actually feed much in the surf zone compared to other areas, because the nursery area, you see, is more than just along the beaches. It extends out to about 15 kilometres offshore and into depths of 100 to 120 metres. So the sharks, when they're in the nursery area, in the Stockton, the Bennett's Beach, the Mungo Brush area, they're not always in the surf zone. And in fact, it appears that they spend only about 20 to 30% of their time in the nursery area up against the beach in the surf zone.
Right, and sometimes very close to those gutters, right on the surf zone. Do we? Well, they're totally protected, aren't they? Do we have an idea about their numbers? Has this given us a better idea about their numbers?
Look, the question of how many white sharks are there, and probably even more importantly than that, whether the numbers are increasing, decreasing, or staying the same, is actually the focus of our research. But to be able to understand what's happening with their populations, we need to understand their movement patterns, what areas are important to them, and how best to count them. And in fact, this research up here is exactly getting at that issue. We're teaming up with colleagues from the University of Technology in Sydney and conducting aerial surveys of these beaches up here to be able to count sharks. And then our research on movement patterns and acoustic tagging provides us with information on how often the sharks are here, when they're here, how long they stay for, and how long they're in, how much time they spend in the surf zone where we can count them. And we use all of that information together to help us understand when the aerial surveys see a number of sharks from the air, how that relates to how many sharks there are in the nursery area.
Are they always opportunistic feeders, or do they get to a certain size where only marine mammals can sustain them?
Look, even when white sharks get to a very large size, they always feed on a variety of things, of which marine mammals are added to the diet. Typically, white sharks, when they reach about 3 metres in length, will start to add marine mammals to their diet, like seals, for example. However, white sharks only feed, the seals only form part of their diet. Even when they're really big, they'll continue to feed on other things like other sharks, like larger fish and stingrays and things as well. The main objective of our research now is to understand the population status, so understanding whether their numbers are going up, staying stable, or going down. And that's a good measure of whether or not protection, which came into Australian waters between 1996 and 1999, whether that protection has indeed been effective.
Do we know where their breeding grounds are? These fish, I guess, are teenagers, juveniles, the ones at Stockton. Do we know where their mummies and daddies are making them?
Well, what we can tell you is that the females do not give birth to young in this area. So this isn't a pupping ground, it's a nursery area. I spoke earlier about the nursery ground down in southeastern Victoria, and we believe that's closer to where the mothers, the females, give birth. We believe that happens in Bass Strait in Victorian waters or Tasmanian waters, and that the newborn white sharks, which are pretty big, they're 1.3 to 1.5 metres and up to 35 kilos in weight when they're born. We believe that the nursery ground of southeast Victoria is where they go to during their first year, and then they start migrating up the coast. And when they come to the end of their first year of life, they'll enter the nursery area here up at Port Stephens, and then every year from then on until they're 5 or 6 years old, they'll cycle between the nursery area here and the one back in southeastern Victoria.
Just mind-boggling how big Mum is to give birth to such a bouncing baby. I mean, she's got to be 4 metres or something plus, has she?
Well, in fact, that's correct. White sharks have up to 10 or so pups at a time, and when you're dealing with 10 35-kilo babies, you've got to be pretty big.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary. And in fact, white sharks in Australia, the females, don't mature until they're close to 5 metres in length, and that can put them at anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 kilos in weight.
Yes. Groundbreaking stuff, this really, isn't it? Because I'd say this would be world-leading stuff. I don't think they have this much knowledge anywhere else.
Well, that's true with respect to what we're building with the whole population model, so to speak. The knowledge that we have of the juvenile nursery areas in Eastern Australia surpasses what our colleagues know of similar white shark populations in other areas of the world. And that's what makes these areas unique to us and, of course, unique to white sharks here in Australia.
Thanks for joining us on The Big Fish.
My pleasure.
Barry Bruce from the CSIRO. It's 25